Your aesthetics are telling on you. Let's sit with that for a second, because I don't mean it to be denigrating. When I say it, I mean it as an invitation. Design is never neutral. What you call clean, elevated, polished are all code words. That's all saying something. It's talking about who's being included, whose point of view is being prioritized, and it's also talking about who's being excluded. We use these to communicate our values. We communicate our priorities when we're designing. We're communicating power, value, systems of morals, identity, and yes, connection. Sometimes this connection and this inclusion can also be exclusive. So when people say things like, this is just good design, this is great design, it's universal, I pause when I hear that, because universal is code for what is culturally relevant to one person. It fits into visual language that describes what is important to us, whose opinions matter to us, who we prioritize, and whose perspectives are the ones that we hold dear. And let's be honest, when your site says something like, everyone's welcome, who are you actually speaking to? What we know for certain is that you're speaking to a community or people who have high speed, regular internet connection. They have the capacity for high data loads on a mobile device or a laptop. There's also the assumption that they have a mobile device or a laptop or technology through which you're communicating to them. That may not be the case. Also, we're assuming the people we're speaking to are either fully able-bodied, fully able to access the technology or what it is that we're producing. They are fully able to hear, to see, but it doesn't include, for example, prioritizing, including captions. We assume captions are only meant for people who can't hear well. But what we do know for certain is that people use captions to hear, even though they're reading the captions. People who think differently, process information differently. When they see the words written down, they're actually hearing it and putting context to it. So without those captions, they're missing significant amount of information. This is not a glitch. It's a decision that we must make every single time we design. We have to think about who we're prioritizing these designs for. Let's talk about the difference between aesthetics and design. When we use aesthetics that invite, what are we doing? What does aesthetics that invite inclusion look like? Design or aesthetics that invite are also ways to bring in people who we consider to be on the outskirts. Inviting design is also about power. So if we're using aesthetics that are inviting, we're thinking about certain people who have certain levels of power that we're trying to bring forth. If we're inviting the people on the margins into the design conversation, we're prioritizing their lack of power, and we're trying to include the fact that they also have a perspective that is most likely going to work for the majority of people who are going to use that product, rather than focusing on one person whose design ideas are not inviting, but they're exclusionary. When we do this, we're highlighting power in aesthetics. We're also highlighting a different type of cultural understanding. We're prioritize a certain viewpoint, a certain type of design element over what we would consider to be the non-norm. But an inviting design says, you belong here. Your ideas matter. Your perspectives fit in. Your perspective is important. On the other hand, one that's highlighting power is exclusionary because it's pushing out different types of perspectives, and it's also focusing on control. We want to be able to control the perspectives that we're highlighting and presenting as the norm or as the desired design element that we want to feature. Design shouldn't be about control. It should be about inviting you in. A controlling design also says, I need you to match my pace. I need you to match the pace of everyone else. I need you to put down your power in favor of this other one that I've designated as more important. When we design by inviting in, though, we're creating the space for access. We're creating the space that's necessary for people who are not usually highlighted, for perspectives that are not usually focused on or prioritized as a perspective that is worthy of being centered and designing around. What we're also doing is saying anyone who's able to access this design is welcome. So then when we're designing by inviting in and including in, we're creating the space and the platforms that are necessary to have a change, a shift in power dynamics because we're shifting access dynamics. Let me give you a few real-world examples. You walk into a building, a beautiful skyrise, gorgeous, modern. You walk in, you're able to walk in, but you notice there are no stairs. If there are stairs, there's no access ramp for anyone who has mobility issues and cannot necessarily walk on stairs and they need a gradual incline. That could be someone in a wheelchair. That could be someone who's elderly, using a cane. That could be a child who's not old enough to be walking on their own on the stairs. When we don't think about the possibility of these different people within the spaces that we're creating, and we're excluding those types of access from the situation, the product, the tool, the design, whatever it is that we're making, we're saying something very powerful. We're saying only these kinds of people are welcome in this space. Only these kinds of people should be present, or only these kinds of people tend to be present. What you're not saying is, I'm making this space accessible for every single person who could come into this arena. A second example, you're a job seeker and you're applying for a new job using the internet. You go to the company's website and you're looking at the UI. It's clean, it's lovely. You can read the information. You know where to upload your documents, but there's no place to actually select upload. There's a button missing. Someone didn't think the whole process through. Or something as vital as that could be missed, right? It could be something very, very small. Let's say you don't speak English as your first language, but the site is in English completely, and there are no possibilities on the site to shift the language to a second one. Let's say this company is global. They have a responsibility for making sure that whatever it is they're communicating can be read and heard by everyone. So they should have their site in multiple languages, including for applying to jobs. If you look at a job application in a different country, usually they're in 2 languages on the same application, the details. It would make sense that when you're also applying to a job that may not prioritize one language as the priority, there would be an expectation that the user can change the language to a language that they're able to understand and then continue the process in participating through that entire flow. When they get stuck, that's a design that is not inviting. That's a design that's also assuming you're only speaking one language, you're coming from one culture, you're coming from one particular place. The point is, it's not that designs aren't pretty. It's not that designs in the glass-filled modern building is not accessible. It's that there are little pieces of information that we are glossing over that make it extremely difficult for certain people. Not everyone, but when we make that connection to the impact that it's going to have on the entire population, then we start to think about who is at the table, whose experiences we're prioritizing, whose information we're using to input into the design that is then going to impact everyone else around them. The way I see aesthetics is through the lens of disability. I'm able to say this now because I've come to terms with the fact that I have disabilities. Had you asked me earlier, I would have said, I look at the world from the perspective of being a Black woman. I wouldn't necessarily expound upon that, but being a Black woman is not the same thing as being an African American or being an African, right? So I see design from very, very particular perspective of my lived experience. That doesn't mean my lived experience can trump everyone else's lived or learned experiences. What I can do is pull from my experiences of disability and ability, of care, empathy, and understand that everyone else does not see or walk or move through the world the way that I do. But if I make the intentional care to reach out to someone else who does not experience the world the way that I do, together we can think about what access points make it possible for me as well as for them, and then as well as for every other person who will eventually be in that state of ability at some point in their lives. We bring all that into the design, meaning we're thinking about how to design for everyone with everyone's needs in mind. And when I design, I don't design for uniformity because that doesn't exist. It's not possible. This world is diverse. It's meant to be diverse. We would be boring if we were all the same. So what's important is thinking about where that diversity comes in, how to elevate it, and then how to use it to make sure that you are providing the best, most interesting experience for every single person that you want to experience whatever it is that you're designing. You want them to be happy. Why not find out what does make them happy? Why not find out what does make it possible for them to actually move through the gorgeous space that you've designed, interact with whatever it is that you've placed there, connect with people. That's what makes design that's inviting the most powerful way to design any product. I design for values. I design for clarity. I design for sovereignty. And most especially, I design for trust. I can't create anything if I don't have the trust of the people who I want to experience the thing that I'm creating. I want them to enjoy the thing that I'm creating with them. And the only way to get there is through trust. You get to trust by inviting in, not excluding or coding out. If you're building something right now, designing something right now, I want you to ask yourself several questions. 3 primary questions. 1, who was this built for? 2, who had to adapt to be included? 3, what values are my design choices that are inclusive and inviting rather than exclusionary? Because here's the thing, if your audience is growing, but your aesthetic is not changing, you're staying static, you're not evolving. This is merely curating. You're not providing the kind of design or product that your audience, your community needs. I want you to let your design tell the truth about what it is that you stand for. I want you to let your design call in the people who need to be there. That requires you to step out of your comfort zone and to be intentionally curious about who you're inviting in to your design process. Because when you design for clarity instead of status, When you let your design tell your truth, you share that you're caring about the people involved rather than just compliance. You're sharing that you're interested in making sure people have a positive experience rather than just ticking off a checkbox. That's when your world will really start to resonate. That's when it becomes real. So let's return to the beginning. Your aesthetics are telling on you. Now the question is, what do you want your aesthetics to say about you? If you're ready to build something impactful, or you are already building something impactful, I want to be there to support you. Did you know that we will all actually be disabled someday at some point in our lives? It's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you want to learn more about how this can impact our world, the designs that we make, the products that we build, check out my video.